let's get quirky and relatable and on the wrong side of the wamanzs movement today. By the way, I apologize if I sound congested at all. I've been sick all week with the plague that goes around every single semester when everyone comes back from their real life and back to school. So, why Formula One's decision to ban grid girls matters. Now, I originally was going to do a completely different video about a completely different topic, but this topic, this issue, this discussion, it kept me up until 3 a.m. on a school night, reading bullshit tweet after bullshit tweet. That was a sign that I had to make a video on it. When it comes to the objectification of women, what might seem harmless is in fact very dangerous. Interesting you say that, Vicky, but we'll get back to that later. First it was darts. Now Formula One has become the latest sport to announce that it will stop using grid girls at their events. Boxing, however, will not be following suit, and we will continue to see ring card girls at boxing events. First things first, how are we defining grid girls? They are usually young women who stand on podiums or hold scorecards while, more often than not, wearing reasonably little. Not entirely true. I'm sure you've been following the debate online yourself as well. You'll notice that grid girl attire, based on the many attire that grid girls on Twitter have provided us with over the years, can come in all different shapes and sizes, much like humans. So, at best, what you are saying is a misrepresentation, and at worst, it falls somewhere within the hierarchy of the cardinal original sin in terms of marginalized isms. This, in and of itself, isn't necessarily a bad thing. After all, it's every woman's prerogative to wear as many or as few clothes as she likes and climb atop any podium she comes across. I haven't gotten to use this in a while, but you know, since we're talking about objectification, it's only fair that I play the objectification is sexist against women, get fucked card, and oh boy, is it a doozy. But that said, the decision to do away with grid girls in these particularly male-dominated sports is significant. I gotta ask, can we even consider Formula One to be a sport in the traditional sense? Even, you know, I mean, you're driving. It's more of a hobby than a sport, like how Taekwondo is more of an art than a sport, a martial art than a sport. I don't know, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I don't mean to be like a dick, but it is something that I wondered while I was reading through this article. It's in essence the real issue here that I care about, in fact. Guys, help me out. Car racing in particular is a bloke's sport. Yes, nothing necessarily wrong with that. Much like how volleyball is a woman's sport. Oh, don't you know? There are approximately 334 D1 women's volleyball teams, as opposed to an abysmal 22 D1 men's volleyball teams. No one's really crying about underrepresentation within that area of sports, are they? I wonder why. Anyway, you were saying something about something being a sport regulated to one specific gender being a problem, or what have you, shenanigans. Men drive the cars, women present awards, look nice, and stand around the winners, almost as prizes in their own right. Grid girls have been used to promote the sport and as representation of what might be available to any male competitor who succeeds at it. Is that what you think men have deluded themselves to think, Vicky? Is that honestly why you think men race? Because they get the women's? Because they can claim VJJ rights? Because sexy factor? Is that why men race? Is that what you think it's all about? Get the fuck out of here with your mind-reading generalization bullshit. You think it's all about sex? Let me tell you from the perspective of someone who has been raised by a man who loves racing, and who is dating a gearhead. It's not about the sexual appeal. No. Have you ever been behind the wheel of a fast car, Vicky? Been around the sweet, sweet smell of burning rubber, revved an engine that vibrated you to your core, gotten off of or out of a motor vehicle and had that feeling that your limbs were still tingly, not just because of the constant vibrations, but because you felt exhilarated and alive? You've just gone floor to pedal with speed and motion, unrestrained by any limits and away from any slow cruisers. Racing is an entirely different type of release, not necessarily sexual, but it's gratifying. It's a freedom, essentially, from whatever internal limits or life limits that you have. Because in that moment, maybe on a speedway, you're not thinking about impressing a woman. You're not thinking about bills or fucking doctor's appointments. You're not thinking about IRL stuff. What you're thinking about is, well, in some cases life and death, but in other cases just the speed that you're going at and trying to get in front of the other guy. And if you think that that's all about women, you got nothing coming to you, honey. I can guarantee you that these guys don't compete for sex. They do it for the thrill of the race alone, most likely. My poetic bullshit aside, let's get back to the grind. This matters because it sends the message to young women that when it comes to motor racing, a woman's place is on the sidelines, in a supporting role and not the starting line. Does it? Does it really say that? Isn't the perception of young women supposed to be that they are just as capable and strong and independent as men are? Isn't insinuating that the entire outlook on a woman's life purpose is contingent upon her seeing another woman looking glamorous on a speedway rather than seeing, I don't know, say this, just so we're clear, that little round thing there inside the car, that's a human helmet, to be specific? I know you can only see the top part of the helmet, but that's okay. Bear with me, I'm making a point. This androgynous-looking little nubbin poking its smooth crest out of the top of a car, going at approximately 100 miles per hour, that's going to send a woman a message that disempowers women? What? If that's the case, then women have bigger issues than grid girls, my dear. In 2015, Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton was widely criticized after he sprayed champagne in the face of one of the podium girls, waiting for him at the finish line as he celebrated winning the Chinese Grand Prix. Is that much more different than when a team pours Gatorade over their coach? I mean, at least with champagne is a little bit more classy, I assume. Also less sticky. The picture made uncomfortable viewing. The grid girl in question stayed still and composed while Hamilton stood in close proximity as he sprayed champagne directly into her face. The unnamed woman looks deeply uncomfortable but remains standing in position while Hamilton carries on. Whether or not she wanted him to stop, we may never know, but the image of a high-profile, celebrated man acting in such a way sent a message to young women and men that this sort of behavior was acceptable. Well, I mean, if you can't handle the heat, get out of the fucking kitchen, hot diggity. As I just said, coaches have this happen to them all the time in sports. And no one bats an eye when they do it to coaches, honestly, but the moment they do it to the women's, holy hell, it's like you've committed mass rape. And non sequitur of the authors aside, let's talk about your bullshit. How that model didn't actually have a problem getting sprayed in the face for a second. Quote, Shanghai F1 grid girl says she didn't think too much about being sprayed with champagne by Lewis Hamilton. It lasted for 1 or 2 seconds and I didn't think too much about it, Leo said. I think some foreign media are more sensitive about the topic compared to local media, Leo said. I was just told by my employer to stand on the podium and that's what I did. Vicky, are you woman-splaining another woman's lived experience? How dare you? You bigot. This fine specimen of Asian woman can speak for herself, thank you very much. And you can go fuck off. Also, do better research next time, please and thank. Grid girls, podium girls, and ring girls have exemplified sex object culture, so it can only be a good thing that officials in both darts and motor racing have decided to declare the practice as outdated. Speaking to the Times, Sean Bratches, the managing director of commercial operations at Formula One, said, over the last year we have looked at a number of areas which we felt needed updating. While the practice of employing grid girls has been a staple for decades, we feel this custom does not resonate with our brand values and clearly is at odds with modern-day societal norms. We don't believe the practice is appropriate or relevant to Formula One and its fans, old and new, across the world. And hence, for the sake of social progress, a whole bunch of women who, believe it or not, actually enjoy what they do for a living won't be able to enjoy what they do for a living anymore because, well, they've all just lost their jobs. So much for a woman's right to choose. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? See, what you've done here is in empowering women, you've disempowered them. Oh darn, you done fucked. However, not everyone is happy about the ban. You think? Model Kelly Brooks, who is herself a former grid girl, has said that it was one of the best jobs she ever had. Brooke went on to say, you dress glamorously and obviously it's not about being presentable, but I never felt like I was taken advantage of. What? This woman is detracting from the main point of the argument? Similarly, darts walk-on girls Charlotte Wood and Danielle Alfrey told ITV's This Morning that they felt the sport was giving into snowflakes and that they enjoyed their jobs. Good on those girls. Good on them. I find it really hilarious that you decided to mention this, Vicky. Guys, keep in mind what Vicky has just said, because it's absolutely golden that she ends on the note she does, given what she just acknowledged. Literally not more than 5 seconds ago in the article. A petition to overturn the ban on walk-on girls in darts has now got over 30,000 signatures. Wait for it. It's worth noting that it was, as you might expect, started by a man. The fuck does that mean, Vicky? Why would that be worth noting, Vicky? Because men only care about grid girls? What about the women you just mentioned who were peeved they lost a good source of income? What about me, who was responding to your article in a video format? Long form. And I say long form because you go on and fucking on. It's also worth noting that I'm being melodramatic, but I'm doing it to make a point. The outrage over this isn't about men losing avenue for which to objectify women by. It's about the fact that a choice was taken away from women who had willingly made a choice prior to this ban. All for the sake of what? Empowering women? Try to wrap your dick around that one. The irony is not lost on 30,000 people, presumably, but it is, however, lost on you, Vicky. While you may argue that it is a woman's right to choose what work she does and doesn't do, I feel the blood coming on. But there is a bigger picture to consider. Of course there is. Translation: women's individual choices don't matter in the grand scheme of things. We'll get back to this one later. Broadly speaking, you can't ignore the inherent sexism that surrounds these roles. Employing women solely in a decorative fashion to adorn and praise successful men is nothing other than problematic. Is it, though? We do it all the time in our advertisements, in movies and films, TV shows, and not just with women either, men too. As with anything, context is key. The problem here is not women's bodies, nudity, or sexuality, it's the monopolization of those things by men in a male-dominated sphere. But they're not nude, or sexualized really, at least not overtly. Sure, the outfits are form-fitting, but to be honest, I saw worse walking through high school in summertime-ish, or going to a beach, or watching any music video ever done by any pop artist ever. Beyonce. A true feminist. The sexual objectification of women by mainstream media has been found to have a profound negative impact on women's mental health. More than this, sexual objectification, sexism, and sexual violence are not separate issues. All three problems are completely interlinked. A study from NYU's Department of Applied Psychology explains, first off, hang on, so we're clear, this isn't actually a study, it's actually a collection of other people's research and claims and articles and such that's been dumbed down and condensed greatly to support the author's idea. Like, no joke, there's no hypothesis, there's no condition of the independent control, dependent variables, or random assignment, etc. Nada. She's just telling you what she thinks and tells you that that's what you should think too, based on all of this compilation of data that seemingly is connected in some way. Lucky for the author of this study, I didn't have time to go into all of it. I'll just take the quote at face value and go through 2 of the author's citations behind this quote, which there are 8 if you need to cite 8 different things in block formation for one quote or one claim. Chances are you're not actually saying what you think you're saying, or you're not saying it in a way that is clear, or you're not saying it at all. A sexist joke and an act of sexual violence might be dismissed as 2 very different and unrelated events, but they are in fact related. These 2 behaviors are connected by the presence of sexual objectification. Culturally common and often condoned by Western culture, the sexual objectification of women is a driving and perpetuating component of gender oppression, systemic sexism, sexual harassment, and violence against women. So as I said, I don't have time to go through all of this study, much less all of the 8 fucking sources. This is 4,000 fucking words. It's gotta be half an hour to record, dude. Just because the way that I talk, which is dyslexically. But I will take 2 of her sources to task. The second oldest and the newest within this claim. And I had to take the second oldest and not the oldest, because the oldest I can't find an online source for, even when I checked Google eBooks. That's how long ago 1995 was, I guess. Anyway, so an article from 1997, it's actually just a self-reported survey from 2015, but who's counting? Now, I did this so we could see where we started and how far we've come in terms of research on this topic. So, what's our Department of Applied Psychology person, Emma, got to say about this subject again? The sexual objectification of women is a driving and perpetuating component of gender oppression, systemic sexism, sexual harassment, and violence against women. In order to do a study that proves sexual objectification actually causes all of these nasty things to happen to women at an alarming rate, you'd need to start from a baseline of, say, some bitch walking down the streets of New York wearing nothing but a bikini and see if she gets attacked or sexually harassed at a predominantly higher rate than, say, someone wearing a snowsuit or whatever. Pick your fancy. We will be looking at 2 studies, as I've already stated, from this compilation of 8 different fucking sources in a block without quotes. Do you see what's wrong here? Anyway, sorry. Fredrickson and Roberts, 1997. This book you've cited not only makes your case from a theoretical standpoint, of course, but it goes a step beyond that. And it's kind of funny. In part 1, while describing objectification theory, the text states women's bodies are looked at, evaluated, and always potentially objectified. Always present in context of sexualized gazing is the potential for sexual objectification. Do you know what that sounds like to me? And say to the believing woman that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, that they should not display their beauty and ornaments except what must ordinarily appear thereof, that they should draw their veils over their bosoms and not display their beauty except for their husbands, their fathers, their husbands' fathers, their sons, their husbands' sons, their brothers, and their brothers' sons, or their sisters' sons, or their women, or the servants who their right hand possesses, or male servants free of physical needs, or small children who have no sense of shame of sex, and that they should not strike their feet in order to draw attention to their hidden ornaments. And O you believers, turn you altogether towards Allah that you might attain bliss. The Quran 24:31. So my question is at Emma. Is every woman wearing a hijab or a burqa your solution to this problem of the male gaze? Just curious. And then let's move on to the next study because I'm already done with this fucking book. It's fucking 30-something pages. Ain't nobody got time for that. Miles McLean et al. 2015. They completed a survey measuring trauma, history, objectification experiences, body evaluation, and unwanted sexual advances, constructs associated with self-objectification, body surveillance, and body shame, and trauma symptoms. The relationship among the variables were consistent for both women with and without a history of sexual trauma. Our hypothesized path model fit equally well with both groups. Examination of the indirect effects showed that experiencing unwanted sexual advances was indirectly related to trauma symptoms through body shame for those with and without a history of sexual trauma. The most recent study is not but a correlational study, a survey, no less. That doesn't really prove much, as in the author's own words, the relationship was indirect. So I mean, like, dude, your study's title is either clickbait or your abstract is false, which is it? Seriously, someone give me a substantial experiment, something feasible. When women are sexually objectified, the worth of their bodies or body parts are directly equated to their physical appearance, which directly leads us onto their potential sexual function. From there, the implication is that a woman's body exists solely for others to use, view, or consume. This is why the existence of grid girls, ring girls, and walk-on girls is problematic, despite seeming like innocuous, harmless fun. Indeed, research shows that the relevance of such objectifying images also leads to young women internalizing negative ideas about their own bodies. As the researcher at NYU points out, this manifests in the form of self-objectification, and it characterizes by varying levels of thoughts and behaviors such as self-conscious body monitoring, surveillance, and comparison of one's body or body parts to the cultural standard or ideal. Finally, you actually cite something that we can agree on, but here's the thing. Is it practical to say that because this occurs in women, we should get rid of any and all careers that utilize women's body in a manner that might be slightly sexually subjective even? I mean, are you expecting the world to change just so that an individual person is mentally comfortable in it? Honestly? Do you really? There go adverts, cheerleaders, most pop star careers say goodbye to Beyonce again. How about pastimes like swimming, tanning, gymnastics? What about women's fashion? That's gotta go too, because we can't even have women's body parts sticking out in fear of the male gaze and that subsequent objectification or whatever. But even if we made everyone wear polo shirts and formless, ill-fitting pants, there are women who have more pronounced areas than some others. And I'm sorry if my chest tends to stick out more than yours does, but what the fuck am I supposed to do? What do you want from me? To chest bind? To lob off my boobies? Will that help you and your cause? The mental health implications are depression, disordered eating, and reduced productivity. This is known as objectification theory. Objectification theory can suck my dick. I personified a theory, then sexually objectified it. Hey! Yeah, you're right. Bad joke. I'll stick to making sandwiches. A good litmus test for whether something is sexist or not is to ask yourself, does it work the other way around? Do women boxers, cyclists, Formula 1 drivers, or athletes in any field look to the finish line to see conventionally attractive, heteronormative, scantily clad men holding bouquets of flowers for them? You know, they should, because that would be great, honestly. But I mean, how many women boxers, cyclists, Formula 1 drivers, and athletes are there on the field? Grid guys actually did happen once. They tried it out, actually, but they didn't really get much feedback. There wasn't much chance to catch on, because, you know, there's not a lot of women in these areas. These grid guys, they definitely will not work out now. No, so then we must ask why the tradition of women playing this role in men's sports exists. The answer can only be that historically women have not been valued as highly for their abilities as men in our society. I mean, if you want to bring out the pity party game, I'm happy to play. Let's get down to business. I would think that women would consider themselves lucky, in fact, not to have been so highly valued as to be, I don't know, say, drafted needlessly into a war that they didn't necessarily want to fight in for the sake of ungrateful people to come back home to, perhaps dying in some horrific fashion away from their loved ones and everyone they knew. What about mothers who view their baby daddies as nothing more than an ATM to be ran dry and then brought to court again and again for more and more money, even if perhaps they don't have 100% full custody of their children? I mean, you want to talk about objectification? Then let's talk about how men are being used as more bodies to be thrown at an enemy or banks from which to get money from. Have you ever actually paid for a date, Vicky? Honestly? Did you know that the majority of workplace fatalities are male? And so on, but this is not an episode of #everything is sexist. No, this is an episode of this bullshit is a nonsense issue that in rectifying has created more issues and bullshit than not. Oh, boy. Another good test is to ask, who profits from the objectification of women? Grid girls, ring girls, and dart walk-on girls may be paid for their time, but they are not the ones accruing fortunes from those sports. I mean, are they profiting? I think they are, if they're getting paid. This isn't a gender issue. This is barely a large corporation versus worker issue. Completely separate, but invariably a non-issue. Neither the grid girls nor the corporations investing in F1 are getting hurt if grid girls aren't doing their jobs. Honestly, it's a net overall gain for all those parties directly involved. The racers, the fans, the corporations, the sponsors, the girls, the whatever. Formula 1, for instance, is co-owned by several companies, the chairs of which are, you guessed it, men such as Bernie Ecclestone? I don't know who that is. And I don't care. In a statement, the Women's Sport Trust has called for all sports to end their use of scantily clad women at events, saying this is not a matter of feminists versus models, which seems to be the way many people want to portray this story. These changes are taking place because global businesses are making a considered choice about how women should be valued and portrayed in their sports in 2018. They deserve significant credit for doing so. Making women redundant from these jobs isn't going to do away with sexism in sports, but perhaps it's the start of a broader conversation that might lead us to celebrating women, not just for their appearance, but their abilities too. Because it's all about the conversation, isn't it? Let's get down to the brass tacks here. It's not about empowering women and making them more independent and letting them live their lives, etc. In the wise words of @FemFrequency on Twitter, feminism is about the collective liberation of women as a social class. Feminism is not about personal choice. You heard it here, folks. Feminism isn't about women's rights to choose, at least not anymore. It's about telling women what exactly it is that their place is within society. Or at least what it should be. Viva la feminarchy. If you like this video, please consider checking out the Maker, Patreon, Amazon, and Teespring links in the description down below. If you like my stuff, but not necessarily that much, that's cool. You can still comment, share, and subscribe for more content.